Oh, hi, hello. The title of my proposed applied project is Acceptance and Commitment Training Using Behavior Analytic Technologies in Teaching Foundational Skills of Psychological Flexibility. A note up front, my presentation is going to include both code words and ASRs. You don't have to do everything. You can pick to do just the ASRs or just the code words. Of course, you can do it all if you want to. I wanted to put a little embedded choice here for the ASRs. There are no right or wrong answers, just your opinions based on your experience. And the code words, I've tried to make them as eye-catching as possible, and I'll even say them out loud. I'll begin with a brief introduction to the key elements of my proposal, which are emotional disturbance, acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, and discrete trial training. The first code word is you. Emotional disturbance. It's a disability recognized by IDEA in the Department of Education. It is a qualifying disability for special education. The prevalence of emotional disturbance diagnosis for learners receiving special education services in Vermont is about 3 times the national average. For these ASRs, remember, there are no right or wrong answers. They're just asking about your experience and your opinions. So, for ASR 1, have you worked with students who are diagnosed with emotional disturbance? If yes, what intervention strategies were applied to help those students? Do you think that they were effective? If you haven't worked directly with students with emotional disturbance, what intervention strategies do you think would be effective to help these students? ACT has a growing body of empirical research demonstrating amelioration effects for emotion-related distress. Therefore, it may be a good fit for children and adolescents with emotional disturbance. ACT is derived from modern psychology and behavior analysis through relational frame theory. It's an intervention approach focusing on increasing psychological flexibility as a set of skills. Those skills are very similar to the ones found in mindfulness practices, which has its own growing body of empirical support and has been widely accepted by mainstream psychology. In this illustration, we see the 6 processes within the psychological flexibility model, which are contact with present moment, values, and committed action, which are commitment and behavior change processes. We also have acceptance, diffusion, and self as context, which are those mindfulness and acceptance processes. The overall target behavior for increase is psychological flexibility. That's achieved by increases in some or all of those components I just mentioned. The underlying foundational skill in all of this is noticing. It can be further broken down into identification and discrimination. These are challenging areas for the students that I work with in the area of private events. The problem lies in the fact that before you can even identify and discriminate anything, you first have to have a sufficient verbal repertoire in that area and an introduction to the discrete characteristics of those various elements. So, I propose that the acquisition of an emotional vocabulary is a premier prerequisite of the psychological flexibility model of ACT, and that the identification and discrimination of emotions in other private events are the foundational skills and moderators of the psychological flexibility model. ASR 2, in your opinion, What do you think about teaching verbal repertoires for identifying and discriminating private events? Does it have a place in ABA? Why or why not? Discrete trial training. It's a well-established behavior analytic technology. It's widely used for teaching skills including vocabulary acquisition, and there's a very large amount of supporting research for that. DTT is also a well-established method for discrimination training through receptive and expressive identification. For this proposal, I took a particularly close look into the work of Lovaas and Sundberg. Therefore, I concluded that discrete trial training would be a good match to teach the identification and discrimination of private events. More specifically, the acquisition of emotional vocabulary words, enhanced with discrimination training of that new lexicon. What it all boils down to are these two questions. Will traditional discrete trial training be effective and efficient at teaching foundational skills of psychological flexibility? And will that lead to an increase in the individual's perceptions and ratings of their psychological flexibility and happiness? This question is also a concern of social validity. As a bigger picture, the study will seek to reveal possible moderators of psychological flexibility. There will be 4 dependent variables of interest: efficacy, social validity, and generalization. That's not 4, that's 3. I'm sorry. There will be 3 dependent variables: efficacy, social validity, and generalization. Each of these will be described in a bit more detail in the method section. The independent variables will be discrete trial training and the SHS and AFQY questionnaires. Again, I'll get into a bit more detail on those later on. Second code word is R.